Good morning, everyone. I can see we have been joined by a lot of people. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Ruchin Chaudhary, and just let me know if you can hear me because this housekeeping is super important.
Yes,
Great,
you know.
great, great. So let's just quickly run small before we start, we are doing a housekeeping at the back, right? A couple of our panelists are about to join, and before we start, let me just set a context once again for everyone, in case in case you have joined in a wrong webinar, right? So today we are discussing how to design build spaces for infection-free world post COVID and beyond. As I mentioned already, my name is Ruchin Chaudhary and I'm representing Merino Industries Limited here, right? We have a really great set of panelists today with us, whom we'll shortly introduce, you know, and we'll take them through, to the panel. Um, if I can quickly get a housekeeping slide, because I know a lot of you have used WebEx, some of you might not have used. Today, the world is going into virtual world, and video conferencing has become a new normal. There are too many, video conferencing tools which are available: WebEx, Zoom, Meet. So here is one important slide that we wanted to share with you all. As an attendees, if you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, if you want to get in touch or put across your queries, this is how the entire interface looks like for you, those you have joined. Uh, Obviously, there is a, as you can see, there is a bottom pane. You have all your controls there. As an attendee, you cannot communicate directly. This is the restriction with the WebEx tool. But you can still communicate with us. You can type in your questions. As you can see in the second pane, the third icon from the right is where you can actually either get to the questions or Q&A session, or there is a it's this Q&A session is at the bottom also, right? So you can click on that. You can type in your query. If you are not able to hear something properly, please put it out to us. We'll be able to see it, right? So there is a chat box also. I don't think we will be able to use it. We don't recommend using the chat box because it's better to use the Q&A section. It's much better, right? Um, in case you have any issues with the WebEx tool, please put it on the Q&A or chat, or whoever is your contact. If you got connected through some of your team members who are with Merino, please get in touch with them. We'll try and sort it out for you. Right? Super. Uh, I think we'll just wait for a minute, and then we'll set context once again because people are still joining. Um oh, that's awesome. While I finish my speech, 11 people have joined. Super. So, continuing with my housekeeping exercise today again, um, the entire session that you're gonna be involved with is actually divided into loosely two parts, right? The first part is where we we'll introduce the panelists. The panelist will start discussing and debating their point of views as our moderator, which I'm shortly going to introduce to you. He'll take them through, and they will discuss and debate about their points with respect to the topic that is there on the panel, right? Once that is done, each one of them will speak about their thought process, and their expertise are lying in different domains, right? Once they are done with that, we will break for 5 minutes. Before that break, we would request you to put out a lot of suggestions, questions, and ideas into the Q&A section. We will pick 4 or 5 really relevant topics and questions from there, and we'll start moderating on those questions. We'll start moderate panelists that how do they want to take it up, right? How do they want to answer those questions, or how do they want to look at the future in that case, right? We'd also like to hear the feedback from you during the session also. So without much ado, it's time for me to introduce our moderator today, Mr. Vivek Rathore. Vivek, just say hello if you can hear me.
Good morning. And namaskar to everyone.
Yeah, so small word of praise for Vivek. You will eventually, those who know Vivek, they anyways know him. So, but a small little word of praise for Vivek. He's an alumnus from IIT Roorkee, if I'm not wrong, gold medalist. I don't know you still want to cash on that or not, but that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Right?
You can save that. I think you can save. You just said it's okay. I have just to practice as in Calcutta. That's good enough. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Vivek actually started his consultancy in 2005. And his team is supported by his partner and landscape principal Anuradha Rathore. 8 associates and over 40 members. That's a huge team. And in his small words, he says that he has a vision to evolve the new age value system for Indian design environment. We had an old age value system, and he want to evolve the new age design system. So that's really awesome. From there, I would like to hand over the reins to Vivek. Vivek, please go ahead and introduce our panelist.
Yeah, namaskar and good morning to everyone. Thank you, Ruchin. It was very nice to help us know how to navigate through the entire WebEx platform. I'm sure that everybody is there, and I'm very thankful for the panelists here in the morning. And of course, nothing works without the great audience, the people in front. And here we are basically not coming into a panic reaction WebEx. We want to come into an evolution WebEx. We want all of us together to think beyond and help us actually well connect with the new normal. So friends, with this, I would actually introduce the panelists in just a small thing. You know most of the people here, but wonderfully, I would actually thank Merino Industries, their young director, Madhusudan Loya. Madhusudan, how are you?
Good. How about you?
Yes, good to see that you have been operating your factory and very actively your team is working. So that's good enough. And thank you for this initiative. Thank you for calling all of us here. And the next person is Mr. Devatish Shahu. Normally I call him Devatish Shah. You're welcome, Devatish Shah. Welcome in this thing. He has a fantastic practice under the banner of eSpace, has guided his team, and he has a partner with him who have been able to do wonderful projects in various disciplines. But essentially, we have in this present context, we want to call in the architects who would actually share a lot of light in the relevance of their expertise, if I can use the word in this now, though I'm saying that we are all diversified and talented. But I call Devatushda essentially to highlight and help us understand the residential scenario, the apartments. We have Abin Chaudhary. Abin runs a very dynamic practice, practicing all over the country with the ADS, under the banner of ADS, and he is also quite well experienced in institutional and schools and colleges design. So we brought him into that understanding and brought him as an expert in this panel. We have Mr. Ray, SS Ray. Namaskar, Mr. Ray from Bhubaneswar. Mr. Ray brings a lot of energy from the residential sector in terms of farmhouse, and he is a best connected with the world of academia. So that's a great part, and he brings in a lot of green understanding, the brilliance of sustainability. That's what Mr. Ray would actually highlight. And I'm not been able to connect directly in the panel, but I also welcome and introduce Mr. Chopra. Mr. Pradeep Chopra is a partner with PS Group, and he has been steering institutional programs for the group and has been guiding and inspiring in terms of visionary and value addition in the entire sector of real estate in Calcutta and in the country. So he is one of the guys who I know has actually steered down the value system of the realty sector in the country. Wonderful, and welcome to all of you. So today we just begin discussion, and I'm sure that as Madhusudan said, that in case if you have a question, you put in a Q&A, or you can put down in the chat box to the host and to presenter. Just click to the host and presenter and send it to them. We will screen the questions, and after the session overs, we do a isolation section for Q&A, and we take it up there. Friends, this is a very different time. Difficult or easy is a very relative word, but it's a very different time. We have not been able to understand or assimilate. We have often been understanding this as a panic reaction. We have been reacting, most often not responding. So we together as people who are responsible to enumerate behavior, places, and processes, it's very important that we bring these three aspects in sharing the ideas today, deliberating on the thought process, and making ourselves prepared for the new normal. This discussion is not even a 1% of what we need to evolve, but it is a beginning. It is a one small drop that we can all make sense together, and the small thing that adds up to make wonders tomorrow. In the beginning, we all wanted to start our office and work. Then we realized that our homes are going to be the future work platforms. But are homes good enough? Are we safe perfectly? What we're doing, the way we are? Are our homes equipped enough? Do they need any change? Any retrofit? Or is the normal process at our home and at our workspace and outside needs to change? So I would request my panelists to deliberate a couple of minutes, maybe 3 minutes or a little more, on your field of expertise, essentially highlighting what are the things that the people would understand or need to understand when they use the spaces. How would the spaces change? What kind of engineering change? What kind of planning change would you perceive? And definitely there's an operator which guides the processes. And how does the process weld very well with us in the space as well as human beings? So the three connects with your place, with your expertise, is what we are trying to bring them in this front. So I would start with Devatush Da, Mr. Sahu, Devatush Sahu. You need to actually, you're the person where we are connecting at home, and you have made many homes, the vertical homes, many apartments, seen the way Eastern India has changed, and a lot of dynamics. So keeping this in mind, Devatush Da, request you to kindly give us some light on this front in terms of residential, apartments, condominiums, and much more. All to you, please request you to get started on.
Thank you, Vivek, for a wonderful insight of the subject. And I must thank Merino for organizing such an wonderful a program. I think what is the need of the hour for the architects and the developers and the common people, so to say. I think today's subject was as it has been mentioned by Vivek, that designing spaces for a infection-free world. I think this is fantastic, but to design an infection-free world, for an architect it is possible, they can do it, but we don't want a space designed like hospital, because hospital is perfectly supposed to be infection-free. But we don't want our home, our unit, where and which has been proved as the most precious thing in our life in this COVID era, that home is the most important place to stay. So I think it's better to place it in a way so that we can design something, some resilient design. How we design a resilient building so that we can quickly come out from the difficult situation from a space which is properly designed. There are two things. One is there are so many buildings or so many houses which have been built, and there are so many buildings which will be built after this COVID era. I mean, this up to this time. I think to start this, to design this resilient structures or resilient homes, we should concentrate on three pillars like health, economy, and food. Food is a very vast thing to be self-sufficient in urban sprawl. It is itself a huge subject, so I'm not going into that detail, but that self-sufficiency is needed for this purpose. Then economy, one can have their building, one can have their own units, but to maintain that and to regularly to run the show, it has to be very, very economic, so that in the event of the COVID era or any pandemic like situation like this, we can have the financial support from there. So I'm not going into that detail. I will more concentrate on on the health factor. How to ensure a healthy living through design. That's very important. And there are some existing scenario, and there are some new scenario which will be designed. Healthy means it may be a physically healthy, or the mental health also is very important. So we have to stress upon both the parameters, like physical health and the mental health. You see, friends, the passive design principles, it's a very widely used term. We know all these things, and it is from time immemorial we are practicing these passive design principles. But unfortunately, many of us do not practice that because of pressure, because of market forces. But I think this is the need of the hour, to design each and every building, be it residential, be it the other this thing, to design with the passive principles, like each and every spaces should be very, very well ventilated. Cross ventilation is a must. We should depend less on air conditioning. Even if it is air conditioned, it has to be properly designed, that compartmentation has to be there, so on and so forth. The daylight, it's the most important thing, and the passage of sun within your house. Normally we design something so that to reduce the heat gain of the building, we avoid the sun coming inside our units. But I think this is a contradiction. Here we think we have to have our sun coming inside our house, inside our residences or the units. The thermal comfort, that is also very important. So these are the passive parameters which are very, very necessary for designing. Then there are certain things which are very important, that is the physical interventions in the design. I think we used to design a very or a open type design nowadays, so that once you come inside your home, it is you will feel like a very spacious, airy space and all that. But it contradicts to the compartmentalization of the new concept, which is a must for the infection-free world. So I think this convertibility is very important, or you can say the adaptability. The design should be such that normally it is an open type house, but if required, with the introduction with some sliding doors or sliding walls or something like that, this can be compartmentalized so that the transmission of the viruses or the germs, it has been restricted. So the design principles, I think that will be changed, or here the intervention will be required. Friends, for the physical and mental health for both, the importance of the balconies, I think it's very, very important. But nowadays, in most of the cases, we try to avoid balconies. And even if it has been designed, sometimes it has been included within our habitable spaces. I think this has to be stopped. In a situation where you have to stay at your home for a month or for 2 months or 3 months like this, then you need to have your garden, your green inside your building, so that your mental health, your stress has been released, and all these things. So the balcony has to be there, and there has to be spacious balcony. And to promote this, I think this has to be stopped, that the conversion of balcony should be stopped. Another thing, there is an legislation has to be changed also to improve the situation. I think the building bylaws, we have to have these balconies to be kept free out of FSI. Then obviously there will be no cost for the FSI cost for the balcony, and so obviously the developer and the architect, they will be more dependent on the balconies in that case. And another thing which is very important while we design the cluster of the building or the building blocks, we have the common area which is very, very tight in most of the cases, to have a very efficient planning, so to say. But is it very efficient in the present context? I think while we are designing the building blocks, there are residential units or the housing units which are on the windward zones, which are very good for the ventilation, for the natural light. But there are many units which are on the wind eddy zones. So I think now the concept has to be changed. And in that case, that common area, I think that has to be kept free from FSI. So the government or the organizer or the sanctioning authority, they have to be also very proactive to promote all these, so that the design principles has been changed, the designs are improved, so on and so forth. Friends, with all these physical interventions, maybe obviously while we are designing the residences, you have to have your own workspace in your residence. That is normally what we are experiencing, so nothing to say about that. But there are many other things which are very important, like the innovation. Now the innovation is very important at this time, because these germs or viruses that spreads with the contact. Maybe in the near future, every person, we have to be dependent on this mobile. Maybe with this mobile, we will open our doors, we will open our windows, we will be switching off our lights, switching on light, TVs, and even with this mobile, we can go inside our toilet to control our shower. Everything is possible. Only thing is, with the help of IoT, Internet of Things, we have to have this building automation, so that with only one device, that means your contact, your touch, with this only instrument, you can do everything. Though it sounds very weird, but I think the days are not very far where all these things has to be there. But the most important thing is the cost of it. There are sections of people who will be able to afford that, but there are people, and there are segment of the housing which are called affordable housing and others, there I think the inventors and the researchers, they have to come out with some robust solutions with less cost so that all these principles can be introduced. I think there are so many other things, and we will discuss all those points once
Sure.
the flow of discussion is there.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. This was fantastic to get started on this, at least. And you have touched actually quite fantastic a couple of points which are very important. You touched the very essence of the need of today when you go for, when they say home quarantine or home isolation, which is going to be led into another, let's say, if it is longer, if you think very pessimistically, it might go into 11 years or so, further along. You still need to go. And it started already. And we know many people need to have quarantine at home or isolation at home, in which, yes, adaptability or compartmentalization, this is something which is very much needed. And of course, we'll come back to you on to how that could be done as an easy method. But you touched on something very interesting, is the balconies which are actually drying up. And Amra, we were here in the hot, humid climate needing the balcony to come out, which are drying up to say this is the modern architecture and this is the evolving Kolkata, which comes back and says, we need this balcony. It is life. Not just for the physical being, but for the mental being. That's a very nice thing that you touched on. And of course, the need of the take is balcony should be out of affair, and that is going to be the way in which the architecture will change, and we'll see dramatic green and all this texturing change. The entire texture, which was becoming opaque and boxy, will now become much more articulated. And of course, that's a fantastic thing. Take from the it is fantastic. Now I'll just bite in a little more. Taking this, I've seen my kid in a home studying from his school teacher coming there, and he just picks up a window, sits down. Of course, he's not seeing his colleagues, he's no more getting distracted. And if the teacher is looking at him, he's like straight, rigid. He's suffering body language. And then I think, oh, I know this is the new normal the kid is adapting to, but he has to go to school. And how can that be done? Maybe for practicals, maybe for games, what needs to be done? So all this comes back that the schools are now grappling. How do we change, or what to get started on? Okay, they're making syllabus which can be connected to the more e-world. They're making curriculums which can be connected. But good schools are you cannot replace the schools. You cannot replace the institutional building, which is the building block in the mind of a student. So there are many things which comes in people who want to actually send them, and they're looking, what will happen next? And they're looking forward to, in the Eastern India, I don't know, this is such a wonderful climate, our schools, the kind of a green that we can have all around the school, the open fields, etc. Though, of course, most of the schools are air conditioning. So some schools are actually grappling if air conditioning works, what happens, how does it change, etc. But there are people, thinkers like Abin, who must always thought something which he wants to suggest as a retrofit, or he's thinking as this can be the slow evolution or the soaking in process. So, Abin, I would like to call you on this one, and I would like preliminary if you can share your first line of thoughts in this present scenario. Abin, all to you.
Okay, Vivek. Thank you, Merino, and of course all Devatosta and all panelists. Educational infrastructure, I rather say, is a large spectrum, and so as a designer, our point of view or our submissions always to create a kind of infrastructure. Okay, so in this particular cases, like in private house, you can build on your own. The school you don't build on your own. Either your client or a kind of an entrepreneur who make those schools, or a government make those schools. And of course, in that particular cases, government has much more say in terms of creating infrastructure, because they do the policies. They do the policies in terms of how the education has to be done, the syllabuses, and creating a national building code infrastructure, all those things. And that is why our parameter has been fixed. The question is, these parameters has to be questioned in fundamentally. And fundamentally, you have to question that why in Shantiniketan, when Rabindranath Tagore started at a Gurukul, Rabindranath has started a Gurukul has started from a long time back. But in terms of the people sitting below the trees and taking the kind of an learning, and they, whenever they need, they can go back to the space. So I'm just thinking about the flexibility of the space. The eventually the place of educational infrastructure will all about flexibilities. I think the large infrastructure, it could be larger mall and other things, it need to be devised in such a way that multifunctional space will get a much more important factor in all respect. Okay. And why it is important to an architect's interventions, not only today, I think it's supposed to be much earlier, but I always feel that there has to be kind of radical push from our end to change the policies. So recent past, we had competitions on, you have been, and there was a part of that, and we are arguing in Calcutta University on deliberation of our presentations, debating. The one judge is asking me, do you know that in future, in next 5 years, people will be coming with a car? And I said that people will not even come to car. They will actually learn from home. So I'm talking about an 8 months or 6 months back scenario. Okay. So the mindset of the judge who is sitting on the government has not evolved. So probably they are thinking to creating a large infrastructure. And today I give you an example. Government of West Bengal has made Presidency University and 3.5 lakh square feet. I think it should be quarantine center. It is empty. Nobody is going there. It's a white elephant for government. You should actually take the infrastructure, a mini scale, multifunctional, completely technology based, and even not only the idea of the educational infrastructure the architect should push, also the syllabus, how they will learn. It's not about classroom inside the spaces, how you actually join the playing areas, the nature to love. So you need to learn and love the nature, the learning process. We need to create the spaces that people, as a teacher, people as a students, start understanding the value of disciplines, the value of knowing the nature, and that is where our responsibility lies. And I always have big restrictions and oppositions when client come to me and say that I need to have a 6,000 students infrastructure, 3,000 student infrastructure. I don't have a problem. My problem is when you're creating infrastructure large. So number one, you're creating a very permanent infrastructure. You don't know how the education system will be going to change. And today, the infrastructure value is big zero. No, I am completely understand the people has to go back and they need to meet friends. But imagine and I'm also not to create a word a new normal, because we need to probably live a life with an on a basics, back to the root with the basics as well, because today you're talking about a virus which touches a contagious. You don't know the future and virus will come from the cell phone. So probably we don't know that. So probably we need to predict how to devise our life in terms of this educational infrastructure, even without a technology, even when needed with the technology. So the important is we cannot fix our lifestyle. We cannot fix our policy only one way forward. Because I always strongly believe that touch is very important. And I come back to that fundamental point of view of my learning is Johannes Palasma's, the book of Hand and Mind. Because the understanding of the design, because of when you hold a pencil and start designing and understanding, so we create a kind of a relationship between a paper, pencil, and your mind. So probably touch is a very important factor in your life, and probably with the touch, so you really can understand. So here, the touching with the friends in education infrastructure, the students when touching their friends and other things is important, because right now it's for them, they are being habituated and forced by them. but probably they are looking forward to going back to the infrastructure. So our infrastructure has to be holistic in such a way that we should actually avoid more avoid air conditioning, more natural ventilated spaces, more infrastructure which is flexible, can go back to the like conference room, meeting rooms, aerobics, classrooms, everything. So more comfortable space. I think that would be a kind of a way forward, and probably we need to push all those areas, that how the educational infrastructure can, and then it's, you need a very fundamental and radical push from architects, and that is my general point of view, Vivek.
Well, that was nice, Abin. And this is something which we all want to hear. You actually want to hear Kache Niche sit under the tree and do a learning there. This is something which we have in our heart from the very beginning. And we all have great memories of our actually education, school memories, which actually are PT schools. Or if in college, we have some outdoor sessions, sketch tours. And you see, these are the best of the memories in our life are actually made outdoors. And that's the way when working on landscape projects, we often realize that how important the outdoor spaces become. And so great to know that though technologically we want to make ourselves updated, but it's far more important for us to realize how do we know and imbibe nature. We still don't admire nature. So when the kids start admiring nature, they will know more and they will find ways of evolving around nature.
Yes.
So first, the basic thing is let us commit to admiring nature, and the education, the institute begins with this part of it. Let's make spaces in which people admire nature and be one. So that's a wonderful take from what you said. And I also know the one thing that you said about places. One important thing that I see in future, the large spaces with government requirements coming, and the government wants to make larger institutes. Of course, they will still evolve. And since they have a mandate which cannot be much percolated immediately, it will need a regular intervention and participation. But one thing is very important to know, that these spaces today, while you're there, mentioned about that this can be quarantine center. So let me tell you, there are institutes. Some institutes in our state have been able to actually hold places for isolation or quarantine, because they were actually became the larger, the multi-purpose spaces in those institutes became useful spaces in terms of emergency. So, and maybe a lot of we make grand parking spaces which have no sense, which cannot be used. So these spaces actually become dynamic spaces to actually have it, contain or provide for such cases in case of emergency. So those spaces which are there, maybe they can be retrofitted or provided with some kind of a finishing system, finishes and retrofit, updates or technology, which they can actually cater to the emergency stuff. And in such,
I just want to make one single point that because of this scenario, the creating an isolations or quarantine center not to be excused creating a large infrastructure. So my
yes.
So
yes.
It is a need for our, but we don't need such a large infrastructure without a need. So that's my point.
Absolutely. I buy your point that whatever is there, that needs to be retrofitted further along. Let's not make the first thing we have to learn at our institutes is consuming less.
Yes.
The challenge, the life has become that, we have been consuming everything more. Our homes, office spaces, institutional areas, everything more and more. So if we all can actually come to a convergence of practices or values in which we actually pertain and say, consume less, whether it is about space or whether it's about resource or time, whatever, and be more naturalistic rather than choreographed or orchestrated. I think this is something which is a wise education and the institutes will actually delve in. And thank you very much, Abin, for that. And we now, because of so much of nature, I'm really actually want to see that I'm sitting out in the garden now. I'm just sitting in front of a almara, a library.
You're sitting behind a flora book.
Yeah, the book on flora. So that's a good observation. So I now want to have the bite of nature from Mr. Ray. Mr. Ray, are you there? How are you? Yeah. So Mr. Ray is basically, it's all up to you now. You would tell us far interesting things, that how that you have been able to delve green and marry nature in your work. And of course, you should be more sought out person when one wants to make a villa now. Maybe they're already giving you calls and saying, book me up for the next couple of months. That's okay. Look, tell us some interesting thing that actually you have been promoting green architecture, sustainable architecture. How do you see it furthermore becoming important? Is it that you're getting food in the home, the houses, the bungalows, becoming more self-sufficient? All that aspects, whatever you can cover in your time span or in your brief note. All to you, Mr. Ray. Mr. Ray, you have to unmute yourself, please. You have to unmute yourself. Yes.
Am I done? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Ray, we can hear you.
First, I would like to thank Merino for creating such a wonderful discussion and emotionally connecting us, although we are physically distanced. You see, architects are always inspired to come up with fresh ideas, more so when we are sitting idle and not much work to do. We are mostly operating from home. And our cities and buildings have to be definitely reimagined, redesigned with a increasing understanding of the disease, increasing understanding of the virus. We are trying to do it more and more. My earlier panelist, Debatos spoke a very wonderful thing. He talked about the passive architecture, understanding green, understanding nature, etc. Abin spoke about convertible spaces and flexibility and optimizing spaces. It's really wonderful. And I also liked your comment on quantity of space, not to have huge quantity of space, is the quality and the value at society. You see, these days when we started working from home, we learned two things. First thing we learned is when we are working from home, the home ambience has to be much better. And Deptos makes tall buildings, large spaces. No doubt we need home automation, etc., etc. And but if the ambience has to be good, you have to have access to green, and there has to be more recreation space. There has to be more nature friendly. And the another thing we learned, because suddenly government of Odisha declared from tomorrow we are working, it's shut down, etc. And we suddenly have to shift home and started working and convert to our offices, houses to offices. So that made me realize that we must understand not of doing yourself technology into our houses. You don't get a plumber, you don't get a person to work, you don't get a painter, you don't get a carpenter. So many changes that has to happen. So that has to that must be done yourself, oneself, so that one can convert it up. But looking into the green spaces, since we are shifting from residence to green spaces, you see, it is not possible nowadays with the cost of land going up. Individually, one cannot afford big lawn, big gardens, etc. So it is a time we must cluster our houses in a pattern that each house get access to a house, and which could be very feasible. Individually, we can afford it. It has to be affordable, because if you have everybody a large open space, only very few people can afford it. Look at into our traditional houses. What values we had, which the post tried to touch. You see, in traditional houses we had a huge veranda. So not only it was protecting us from sunlight, etc., and insulation, but it was also a great space for social distancing. We had a beautiful courtyard. We used to have hierarchy of spaces, and people used to have a bucket of water and mop right in the front. And that was the first hand washing exercise we used to do when we visit our ancestral houses. We always loved, we as architects, we thrive in spaces with light, air, and views. But now the time has come that we must go for a stronger bottom line. Light, air, and views will not be alone. We must design spaces which are carbon neutral. We must reduce energy consumptions, participate in regenerating resources while offering ample space. When we need more empty spaces, see, we all have stayed home and we want to fill the green spaces and urban open spaces. So one of the best way to cycle, cycling cities are very good. So our cities have to be redefined, rechanged, and thought differently. We have it's time to come together to imagine, ideate, and advocate for a future where the world is in harmony with nature. Look at our traditional gardens when you look at the large open spaces and when we are talking about social distancing. There are two, three types of gardens which really impress me. Look into Zen gardens in Japanese. They're quite very planned through contours, through hills, through plantations, through vegetations. They will have small pockets of spaces, and right at the center there will be a water body which is the point of attraction, and people can slowly disperse radially without and distance away as they exit. It's a very wonderful idea. And if we look into our Mughal gardens, Mughals also used a lot of geometry through materials, through specifications, through plant, through nature, through water bodies to divide the space into different small components. Look at us. We are all in Eastern India. We are in the coast of tropical warm India, and we are from Chennai to China. We are in the part of Chennai to China coast. Look at the architecture we need to do. We need to do what Thailand is doing. We need to do the type of architecture Jeffrey Baba is doing in Sri Lanka. What Indonesia is doing. Simple wood and simple lines, straight buildings, and energy efficient buildings, simple and soft buildings. But what we tend to do what the West is doing. We love somehow doing that. I think so. There has to be lot to learn and lot to evolve. One of the worries that comes out of it, because when we are trying to talk about the architecture which is very touch-free, we slowly get very machine-oriented. So you'll have gadgets, so it's you don't have to touch and you open and run. And we already have wash basins which has natural automatic water flow without a touch. But what I would like to insist on that we must evolve from being Indian or understanding our own way of living and leading the spaces, our own way of living in a society, how we handle the spaces, our bazaars, our markets, our open spaces, our live, and the way we talk and communicate to each other, and take that into account and move into a new architectural phenomenon or architectural econ, which will sort of decide. This is very relevant to us, one we made tropical coastal architecture, which Odisha and Bengal lives in. So maybe what Larry Baker used to tell, minimize, because you see, with social distancing, we'll be trying to do a lot of large spaces. And if you want to do large spaces, the country cannot afford that sort of money. And so what we have to do is we have to economize in materials, economize in the technology. We have to bring started his word with economy and economize it in terms of building aesthetics. We have to create a rethink aesthetics, which is very relevant. Yes, not only balcony, the entire panels have to be revisited. the building behind have to be revisited, because the reason that we definitely need larger spaces, but within the larger spaces, we have to also work out in the interior layout how we optimize. I think that's what we have to do in the current situation.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. That was interesting. You know, I got while you were saying, and you mentioned about the traditional values of architecture, and that is something that you have been studying in Orissa, and you have been putting through in a book. I've seen that the book review, and think I've read through that. I think it's a wonderful book on traditional values of the traditional architecture. Now, here is where something which I want to take here, that a house traditionally, and this I want to take it right from Indus Valley civilization, from there to here, our courtyard houses not only segregated but also helped us to come together.
Yeah.
Even when we're living in the house, we could go to the roof and talk to our neighbors, isolated but yet not isolated.
The house had a soul inside.
Yes, and that was something which in Indus Valley civilization they made places that there was a contained courtyard, and then they also made a terraces which from the go, and then neighborhood guy you can talk to. So while you're there, you're doing all your work, but you're not feeling isolated. You're physically away, but mentally connected. You are celebrating being social with social isolation, and it actually got resolved by architecture. This is something which a traditional house actually had that capacity. Whereas now we try not to have, we have all the fancy shapes that we want on the roof, and maybe just get rid of that connecting thing. And we try to explain this by a word privacy of the terrace is needed, and isolate him completely, that in such cases, in such scenarios, he is actually suffering. And it has been seen, those fantastic large houses with which those wealthy lots live, they are more prone to suicides because of social isolation. So houses, actually, the way cities grew, the units grew, and the entire colonies grew in Indus Valley civilization, right from there to the courtyard houses, helped such great things. Another important point you touched, and here I just want a little more elaborate, is we were relying upon one thing great. Our designs helped collect natural resources and helped people dissipate very well. If the gardens, we ensure that all the designs, if there's a rainfall, we collect it. If there's something wonderful, we collect it. And if there's a need of disposal, our designs, our pathways, our streets, our diagonal or radial planning help to dissipate very well. And that's a wonderful take from traditional values, friends.
I actually completely agree with you. See what our modern architecture has done. It has given us modern problems, sedentary lives, unhealthy diets, stress, pollution, nature deprivation, etc. I think we need to create healthier and sustainable living spaces.
Yes, surely. And while we are creating the spaces, our workspaces and designs, we cannot do it just by planning. And here we want to take a bite from Madhusudan. Madhusudan, you are the person who would actually bring in the new retrofits. Our houses immediately cannot change something. We need to immediately cater to all the values, all the needs, all the essentials that we're trying and grappling to. Whether it is for the senior citizens, whether for the kids, whether it's for the surfaces. Essentially, we want to be safe. We want to be infection free. And this is where people like you would take an initiative, a real leap in your R&D center, and come out with something novel and something wonderful and something so interesting and so inviting that while we do a retrofit, it does not become synthetic. So there's so many things which come as a designer. So here I want to take your bite, Madhusudan. It's all of yours. You are there on yourself, and go ahead.
Thank you. It's wonderful being here right now among such eminent people speaking about this topic, which is, I think, very relevant today. I think 3 months back, none of us could have imagined that we'd probably be doing this, and and living in these kind of situations. And I think as far as what we can understand, that this is not going away so quickly. We have to live with it, perhaps, and wait for it to mutate, and we evolve alongside. And I was hearing from everybody before that there are certain and certain points we picked up, because I think one of the big reasons why we wanted to be a part of this was to get the insight, and as to the way forward, so that we can respond to that insight with respect to the products and services that can be made or that can be enabled in order to ensure that we can meet these challenges for these times. And some of these things which were discussed about, and I think we have to make it a part of the R&D. Some of these things exist. We have to ensure that it can be made into available products and services. For example, we heard the utilization of IoT in several areas of where we can contribute towards whether we're talking about laminated surfaces or whether we are talking about any kinds of surfaces that we are providing. We are talking about say furniture products or furniture itself, paneling, and a whole lot of these things is IoT, so that things become smarter. While of course the flexibility of space, the word dynamic was used, so I think which is very, it shows that we need to be proactive to change, and evolution can be there and has to be quick to respond. So the importance of outdoor furniture, the importance of home office are these areas which are very, very important necessities of today. And the idea of how we can work with architects to ensure that the availability of making spaces multifunctional, because this was one of the points which was discussed, and I think Abhin Babu brought this point up, was the appropriate is what is needed to be built now, or the idea of building what is appropriate rather than building excessive. And in these kind of situations, as things evolve, these can be used in multiple ways, in more evolving ways, because on one side, technology is also going to ensure that a lot of evolution in space takes place. So this is another aspect that we figure that has to be brought into the overall picture now. And then there are we can break this up into two parts. One is the immediate. We have immediate challenges right now, like was also being spoken about, that we will perhaps face issues with people wanting carpenters to come home, right, and work out there. So the different kind of challenges that this time brings in, so to allow maybe or perhaps to value add in order to ensure that a lot of things can be DIY or do it yourself in certain ways to enable the thoughts to be more modularized, to make things more flexible. We were speaking about doors, perhaps sliding or partitions which could be made and taken out as and when necessary. So these are very, I would say, incredible insights. And one more factor that was brought out was, while we do this, we cannot forget that all of this will make us more and more focused on the sensitivity to local requirements. Things can be different in different places, so the different sensitivities also need to be kept in mind. And we have to evolve. We have to use the data science that is in front of us to understand how different regions, their preferences and so on, and have to be far more proactive now. I think this brings about that factor that efficiency is another key factor that is desired in terms of not only ensuring the availability of the product, but the ease of availability of the product, the different values that people are seeking in it, right, is to be brought in. We have several products which are or several properties which can be brought onto the products, which may now become much more important. I think, like for example, antimicrobial have been there for a long time, but it was something which was not seen so important, but now it does become very important. And several other things, which can help us in terms of prevention of issues, prevention of say we have the electrostatic dissipative surfaces, which can actually prevent allergies, other than the other benefits that this can bring on. And these products now were mostly thought of as commercial or very specialized scenarios, but actually can become very important at homes as people work more out of homes. So yes, we will definitely, and I think we've got a good sense, and I think we'd like to continue working with architects to understand this more and be quick about responding and coming back to the market to enable these thoughts as they evolve. To be actually fructified. Yeah, that's what I would put it as.
That was nice to hear that person, a company like you taking initiatives, and you mentioned great some words that you would actually make things optimize. So optimizing, even if it's a hardware requirement, or even if it's sometimes we design solutions which become so complicated that it complicates the entire process of life. And I know the story from America and Russia, with both one keeps on making more complicated stuff. They design solutions, and sometimes one gets a $1 billion pen, and one works pencil in the space. So we should actually work out. So what is important is, yes, we are proactive, but can we all together give simple solutions, even if it retrofits chota ho, smaller ones,
Absolutely.
ones which are flexible, and which tomorrow I can take it off and I can put something else or give it back to you again, and you process it again. So that of course, it follows the green principle. Most of the times we don't know what to do when we remove something. The first reaction is, oh, we have to change, and then change brings a lot of resources which opened up. A lot of hardware is unused. What happens to that? So while you are working on your R&D and giving us new products and new solutions, always give us time, or give us thinking, or give us patience to understand that you need to also understand what will happen to the past one. And if you can integrate both, what is left over, and it becomes a great solution.
So I just one thing there, because on this particular topic is sustainability. With for us that includes the ecology and the environment side of things also. So we are we focus on doing or working for this beyond what the statutes require us to do so, because that's a part of our philosophy. And I think this is something which is even more important now in these kind of times. That is, it's a part of how there should not be anything excess. So like you mentioned, the word optimize is the right word. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. And I see Pradeep ji coming here. Pradeep ji, how are you? Namaskar. Great to see you. And I hope that you've been educating your people, your people under you, and all your students. You must be taking lead to a different leadership altogether. So here I wanted to basically take your bite essentially into you hold people in big spaces. You have offices, you make platforms. I'm taking the reality part of yours, large office complex, IT offices, and also you're holding your ID institutes. So while the institutes are the part which we have discussed with Abin, for you, essentially we want to know what is that will happen with the offices, because if officers don't come, I am getting call from my client and saying, oh, I needed a 50,000, now I need 15,000. I said, thank you. Thank you for helping me understand what is going to happen with me. So the first reaction is, I don't want big offices because I'm very happy for people who are working from home. While that is good, but people are immediately reacting to reduction of space rather than qualitative change of space. So they're thinking that more people working from home, thoda kam banao, that's okay, consume less. But instead of quality aspect, what needs to be done in the offices? So this is where we want to understand you have been sitting in a great office with a lot of light and view. And thank you very much. So what I understand is we want to take your bite on this workspace, corporates, and IT offices, office complexes. How do you see the new world changing or affecting them? And what do you think from a promoter's perspective, from a developer's perspective, from the perspective of a person who actually preaches values in reality sector? What do you think that what will happen and how we should react? All up to you now.
See, Vivek, I just joined in when you were talking about a very interesting concept that you were talking about, that how do we use the old stuff instead of discarding them completely? Can we reuse or retrofit or do something about it so that our your living spaces or of working spaces become much safer in post-COVID from the point of view of getting infection. See what you had been to. I don't know. You have been to Eilead. We had used a lot of old glasses, which were discarded from offices which are dismantled or destroyed. Now, what is required is, we have working spaces are very small. Now, how do you isolate a small space from each other? The best way is to use glass. So because it doesn't give you the feeling of claustrophobia, and yet it is isolating you from the person that's sitting next to you. If he sneezes, the droplets doesn't come to you. Yeah, so you are actually protected. You have small cubicles to work, but it is absolutely made of glass. You see the similar concept people are now using in Europe, where the restaurants are, where every table is surrounded by a transparent plastic or transparent glass, so that when you're sitting inside, you are not getting affected by the people sitting in the next table. So the same thing you can do, and glass is, you have a lot of glass available. You can use this, recycle these glass, and use innovative design so that the glasses, your design actually is focused on using the size of the glass is available, instead of first doing a design and then finding a glass of that size. We are doing the reverse engineering and first getting the glass and then designing as per what is available to us. We have done it very efficiently in our second campus and third campus. So this is one way I can see of isolating people, creating that social distance, without increasing the space requirement. Because space is expensive. If you say that, instead of three people, I'll make some one person fit. It doesn't make any commercial sense. But you can always isolate them into glass cubicles. Something like, you have a shower curtain. You can have that kind of thing, and people can go inside and work. Yeah, you don't feel claustrophobic, yet you are socially isolated. Second thing, what we have been able to do is use the old air conditioner blowers. Because when you are replacing the old air conditioners, the blower part is see, you are replacing the compressor, because compressors over a period of time is becoming more and more efficient, energy efficient. So when you're going from 5 star to the better quality air conditioner, it is all because of the innovations and technological development which is happening in the compressors. But blower remains the same. Blower job is only to suck air from one side and throw air from. These are all useful. What we have been able to do is create filters, air filters with blower. What we did is put on the suction side air filter, which is used in the operation theater of the hospitals. We again got a huge lot of such filters, which were like overproduction and all that, and we have created excellent air filters, which filters the air in the room, so it removes the dust, and so it becomes much more healthier and all that. Now what we have done, we have gone a further step. We have taken a kind of a moist thing, which is always kept moist with a solution of hydrogen peroxide and silver nitrate, which is like a what is sanitizer. And now when the air is sucked, it is not only sucking the air particle, the dust particles, it's also sanitizing the air. So what you are getting a throw is absolutely sanitized air and rich in oxygen, because hydrogen peroxide, when it breaks, it becomes H2O and oxygen. So it is actually adding oxygen content in a closed spaces, which are most of the time, if you don't have indoor plants, you have oxygen levels are much less than desired. So that actually creates that sick building syndrome, because with if you have carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide more quantity than required, it actually enhances the spreading of the microorganism. It actually creates, people become you must be knowing that when we were doing this green building, the whole concept started from sick building syndrome. People were falling sick for no reasons when the buildings were getting old. It was all because of these multiplication of microbes and causing carbon dioxide. Now, this, if you have a lot of plants, we have done this vertical gardens in the inside of the buildings, office buildings particularly, where there is a TED talk which says that for every person inside an office, if you install 5 such plants, and they are from Areca palm and mother-in-law's tongue and money plant, which are not very expensive and which very easily to be maintained indoor. If you have 5 plants for each person working inside a closed space, the entire requirement of that person, oxygen requirement, is met by the oxygen output of these 5 plants. And they suck all carbon dioxide, and they also suck the other toxic gases like nitrogen oxide or sulfur dioxide and so on and so forth. So you have, and it becomes like a space capsule. So you don't need any air coming from outside. Even if you don't get any air coming from outside, the plants will keep on purifying the air, converting CO2 into oxygen, and also removing all the toxic gases from there. So I think what we have done in iLead and what we intend doing is to have these vertical garden interiors, and we have to have these kind of very cheap. The cost of making these air filters is like 5,000 rupees, which is which is able to filter the air of like 600, 700 square feet. And not only it filters, it sanitizes the air. So you have a 24-hour sanitizers working. Now, what we have also further done is use these blowers as air curtains. Whenever there's a gate, you have this air coming flat. It's actually sucking the air horizontally and throwing vertically down. Now, there also, what we have done is we have installed these sanitizer things. So when the air is coming down, it is actually sanitizing the person standing there. So suppose somebody is trying to enter from outside, he is asked to stay there under that air for, let's say, 30 seconds or 1 minute. It works like that tunnel, that people are now suggesting those tunnels which are spraying this, mixture of hydrogen peroxide, diluted hydrogen peroxide, and silver nitrate. This air filter does the same thing. So before entering, every person is sanitized. So you have that kind of things which you can do. I can think of these small, suggestions, small measures, which are not very expensive, which is easily doable. And if you do it, I think your primary purpose of sanitizing anybody who's entering the office, keeping the entire office air absolutely sanitized, even if somebody sneezes in the, let's say, who's far off, the chances are that that droplet will not, travel to you or fall on any surface, which again, if you touch, you can get contaminated, because people are asymptomatic. You really don't know who's the carrier. So you have to actually consider everybody to be a carrier. That is the only way that you can, protect yourself. So if you consider everybody who's a potential carrier, so then you have to protect yourself by isolating yourself. And the moment the other person is trying to, transmit, the system must take care of it, and it should stop there itself. So I think these measures, the simple measures, if you do, I think your major, protection is taken care of. So that's all I want to say.
Oh, that I can get a new title. It's called Retrofits by Pradeep, the new book. It's going to be, and this is going to be the hottest selling book in the racks now. AD after AC. It's called after COVID. So I don't know, with COVID, let's say with CWC. So now it's wonderful to know that there's so much of retrofits you have done, and wisely. Retrofits done wisely. You mentioned about the SBS, and I'm pretty sure that some guys who are working from their home or living in a house have started feeling this syndrome, because the way some architecture turns out, that it is actually wise enough to only go back home in the evening, because the home doesn't get so attractive, and living in the houses sometimes becomes, even if you forget about the institutional buildings, the offices, even homes actually give SBS, or can actually create an ambience for giving birth to the sick building syndrome. The good part that you see, you were mentioning about Sanzivera, the mother-in-law's tongue tree plants, and how you incorporate them. There was one wonderful take from there. I know of someone, I know of a design in which they made courtyards with such open courtyards, with such plants, and drafted the air from there, which is often the natural way of living. And of course, it was a contained courtyard. But here we're talking about actually good fresh air. And I quite like the way you mentioned about how you used your blowers and taken the screen and put the peroxide thing, broken down the ions, enrich the ions inside. That's something every one of us can do, because we just estimated the total amount of air conditioning change if it happens in public areas is almost close to 38 to 40%. So the retrofits that we needed, 40% of AHU units need to be changed or altered or geared up or stepped down or whatever XYZ. And there, a lot of resource again goes back. So we have to wisely use it. And possibly we'll use your natural filters. Well, the ones which are used in desert coolers, the system which are used in North India and in the hot places, we have to smartly use the SANI filters, if I can use the word SANI.
Yeah.
Most civilized people use SANI filters, and that's kind of an ad which keeps on going. But that's something, and so reuse is something which I take from what you say, reuse, because these spaces, maybe the spaces don't need to change, but the way we handle the places, we need to change, because the process which alter, and the same things can be done. So what I take is, whatever you have, you can change or retrofit what you have and give the solution, rather than buying in something fresh and adding to your resource consumption palette. So this is a wonderful take actually from this panel discussion, or this discussion that we're having. So before it's almost like 12:20, and I understand a couple of us all scheduled meetings after 12:30. So while we have the questions, we actually plan to take a little small break. But before we go, we can take one common discussion. And this is something which I think that we should be able to tell to our panelists, because I can see that so many people are there. I would like all of us, in their own paradigm, in their own sphere of work, suggest something so simple yet so wonderful, either behavioral or the space change, that you think this can be done, which you think now in your own sphere, in your own places, you have been doing, or you think this can be done in terms of infection control, furtherance of infection. Whatever we have it. If we start working in your place right now, since as he said that, okay, he put filters there, it might take a retrofit, put filters, put peroxides, and hyper sanitize the space. But can we come with simple suggestions which actually architects, and this is where the panel is, architects need to think much more simple, because I can understand that there are non-touch doors going to come. You don't even touch your mobile. Don't even touch anything on the mobile. Just go close, and proximity sensors are there, proximity operators, everything's going to be automated. But at your place, what is the first thing that a student want to ask? Let's say a student want to ask, how do I behave? Or what do I change? A school wants to know, what do I change with the present setup? Okay, I can isolate them, add blinkers if you want to say. What simple things can be done? Maybe one or two simple things, simple suggestions if you can give, what you can do at home, which are actually can be done very easily in this present times, maybe over a period of 1 month before they actually open up, because now we are actually training ourselves to open up. And we have a lot of prescription in terms of sanitization, mask, and things like this, but spatial prescriptions is only by isolation right now. Is there anything further we can add? The forum is all ours. Panelists are welcome to add on to this. Can we unmute everyone so that we can actually discuss? What comes to your mind? And just to initiate, is there something which, we had a keyboard. If you remember, and when you go to the computer center, you had this plastic cover which you place there and actually operated the keyboard, because so that there's no spillover of any liquid or something like that. And then you take it away, clean it. And the other guy comes with his own cover, places on top of the keyboard, and operates the same computer. Maybe a very simple thing, which even if there are less computers there, people tend to use it, because even if there are 2 computers and 10 users, they do it by isolation. Go one way. I've done it in one of the village spaces, going like that, because you don't know how many people are touching what. and with what hands. So this was something which I found very innovative. And such, can we give something innovative points on that? Maybe on your at your home front, maybe in your work front.
You see, what we have done in our housing complex. It's a 8-storied building. The first day when the lockdown was announced, that day we made it possible to cover all the switches, the common switches of the building, and especially the switches of the entry doors and the lift, to cover with a plastic so that it can easily be cleaned every day. So that is the first thing what we have done. But ultimately, if you see each and every household or the units where we are staying, every units has its merits and the demerits. So first thing, I will request everyone that to open all the doors all the time, to keep all the door and windows open all the times, so that a free flowing air that passes through your units. So that is the first thing. And obviously, whenever it is required, we have to depend on air conditioning, but to reduce the use of air conditioning as much as possible. And you have rightly said that computers or the laptop, obviously everyone is keeping those things, but Mr. Chopra has very good suggestions. So I think many of us can improvise our own systems to cope up with this COVID situation.
Okay, that's nice. That's good enough to take. Abhin, you have to add something to that.
No, I think Devadosa has done absolutely phenomenally crispy in terms of that. But I'll rather put it in a very philosophical and way. So, what teaches me these situations? So, it teaches me when you have a laptop and you're doing a webinar, you have to attire only halfway. The office attire, so you have to wear only the half, and well dressed only an upper level. You may not have the attire at a lower level. So, you optimizations is what I'm learning every day and night. So, what is you are not required, you don't have to buy, or you don't have to invest, or you don't have to create. So I think that is a philosophical way, but I think we can leave a lot of minimal interventions in our life. So that we think we are learning every day.
Wonderful. So I that's a good take from you. Consume less. Minimal consumption is a well thought stuff for future. And every solution that whether we retrofit or invent or suggest or plan, let us plan keeping that consuming less and optimizing a resource is the first foremost objective of our suggestions and planning. So this is something I just want to add one wonderful point to what the residential thing added in planning the residential complexes. Right now, what has happened is you actually need to make one isolation room right there next to the gumti or the security gumti, where if such things comes in case of we want to exchange resources or take people in terms of supplies in and out. So there'll be an area, two people, a couple of guys there attending to supplies in a particular contained area and not spread over the entire campus. In such a case, the campus will be always free and you will not such of exchanges. For example, even grocery movements, etc. People are coming in, exchange. So we need to actually have a containment zone. And that can actually have the retrofits, what Pradeep just said, some kind of a fumigation, some kind of a sanitization, which can regularly work there at times. And these guys can actually attend, not actually infect the spaces. This was one of the planning good requirements came in terms of downsizing, or maybe use areas, convert the security rooms or something like that, where people can exchange in terms of outside and inside. So that was something wonderful one guy mentioned in the planning stage. What more we can do? We can
probably we could.
I think
Hello.
Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Ray, please come. Please go ahead. Mr. Ray, we can hear you. Mr. Ray, you,
I think that
Mr. Ray, you can speak now.
Yeah, our future homes are going to be purpose-built home office spaces. And we must at least ensure that good quality natural light and better soundproofing systems between the walls, because that is going to be a home and also a office space, and we must work towards better insulation between walls. They are very possible to do in a short time, and also some sort of infusion of touchless technology. We already knew automatic doors, voice activated elevators, cell phone operated temperature control. But we should also increase the utilization of antimicrobial building materials in facades, wall panels, even
Yeah, Mr. I think there's a little connectivity issues. No, I think that's Mr. Ray. And Mr. Chopra, are you there? Yeah,
I'm there.
wonderful. So great. I think what we can do is we'll go to the question answer sessions a little later, because many people have put up questions, and if we have not further to say in this particular,
Now, Vivek, I have to say something.
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, see, you will see most of the food factories and medicine, pharmaceutical factories necessarily should have epoxy floorings, because epoxy floorings are one where the bacteria cannot multiply. The moment any bacteria falls on the surface itself kills it. The normal touch, it goes. The corners of the rooms are always rounded so that it doesn't collect dust. Yeah, there are certain norms which are already put in by the medical councils of the world for these food processing as well as the medical pharmaceutical companies, which actually reduces the any bacterial growth or any kinds of infection in the factories. Now, those same norms we can have now for a standard office or a standard house. That doesn't really cost. It makes the places safer and it dust free, and the dust doesn't collect on the as the corners. We can do that. Just follow. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. And second, I'm told, I don't know how true it is, that there is a paint developed in Japan, which which is absolutely disinfectant, and a very pretty long life. So on that painted surface, no virus or no microorganism can survive. If they go on that painted surface, the microorganism will not survive. Now the places and the switches which we are touching all the time, if at least that surface, even if the paint is very expensive, at least we can afford to paint those surfaces which are likely to take the infection from one person to another with such paint, then that the chances of getting infection because somebody has touched who was infected and I'm touching subsequently, I get infection. That you eliminate that chances completely. And if it is cheap, it's affordable, then you can actually put it on all the places where people lean or people touch their hand or people do all kinds of things. At least the above surface where the human touch is not possible, you can avoid that person. But areas or surfaces where people are likely to put their hands, even those surfaces can be painted with that paint if it is not so expensive. And at least even if it is expensive, we can at least paint those lift switches and the handles of the doors and all that stuff with that paint. That will eliminate this possibility of getting infected one from another because of the touch gets eliminated completely.
Yeah, that's.
I just want to add something to this
Yes,
because it's very interesting to hear about the paint.
Yes.
We also have a particular laminate as a surface, which is available in cladding also, internal, especially for wall protection systems, which actually does this. Of course, it's own antimicrobial. It does not work on many types of viruses, but it does for the most part of it. And I think what Chopra Saab was saying, if those could be worked on the switches and these panels itself, these are a lot used in the medical side. So in hospitals, a lot across the world, these panels are used even in the walkways and so on. So it solves two purposes. One is the antimicrobial side of it, and it also acts as the wall protection system, so that it protects the walls against stretchers and so on as well. So something like this is pretty much a possibility, and I think that paint also, we'd like to also understand more about that, and in order to understand how or what can be done on other surfaces to bring it to light as well.
Wonderful. So we have got a little more material science technology is coming up very fast, and applications are coming. There are paints which actually apply, and all that you need to run is UV lamp once on the surfaces in a day, and it'll be charged enough to take care of your paints or kill your viruses for the entire day long. So 24 hours, just you have to run the UV lamp, and in that cases we might have the UV lamp there on the corridors. You just switch it on and just blast off all the viruses there. There are paints and retrofits which have copper ions being charged. So the copper material, which was actually ancient Indian science or ancient science, which all over the world, that it's actually has charged ions which actually kill the bacterial and fungal growth, virus growth. So there are paints and space which will come into place. And of course, the more important part is how we actually prevent settlement of dust. So the corners have to be splayed, corners have to be filleted, and all the retrofits in terms of skirting design, in terms of wedge design, edge design, all have to be much more rounded off rather than sharp or reverse crevice or flutes. So all the designs are much more going to be visual flutes rather than have much flutes. So that as much settlement of dust and microbes you can contain. So we start thinking the creativity as much more artistic, and the textures have to be much more well thought of. Whether this texture is just not a great thing to touch and feel that, well, okay, but some textures which we are putting in our places actually add up to accumulation of dust and virus content. So fine, this is good enough, and we will save this time. We will take a small break of about 5 minutes and join back for question and answer sessions. We've got a host of question and session, and we'll just a small 5 minutes break, and while we
Vivek, just before going for the break, I think it reminds me to say a quote of Glenn Markert in continuation of what Aubin said. Glenn Markert said that the life is not about maximizing everything. It's about giving something back, like light, space, form, serenity, joy, and you have to give something back. I think this is the most
wonderful.
apt a quote at this time, at this hour.
Beautiful. So we're taking back this thought, and coming back again after 5 minutes, we'll join up with the question answers. While all the questions have come, we'll just sort it out. It'll be taking 2 minutes more. So we take this break, and we request maybe if someone, one of our panelists, Abin has some already meeting. Somebody has a meeting there, so we'll take. Thank you, great. Thank you to Abin. Abin, thank you very much for being a part of it. And in case if you can join and you can stagger your connection, please join back for the question answer session.
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wouldn't life be better if we became a little more thoughtful in our daily lives? Well, Merino restrooms are thoughtfully designed for comfort and convenience wherever they are installed. For instance, Merino restrooms can have hooks to hang shopping bags, grab bars for additional support, emergency alarm, hand sanitizer, and baby minder for easy use. So, if you put a little more thought to your restroom solutions, you'll find that the only name that stands out is Merino restrooms.
Yeah, that was a restroom break. That was a nice restroom break. And I saw the way the hand sanitizers did work there then. Good that you have thought earlier. And I expect something more. Maybe the hardware can become a little more non-touchy. So I can. So when I sanitize my hand, I would ask. I would do something inside, and it will open, and not someone open from outside.
There are various challenges because we've been working on something like this for quite some time. But there have been certain challenges which we've also got to understand. There can be emergencies and so on. So it's something which is very interesting. We've reached somewhere, but and I think we'll discuss that separately as to how things work.
So what I can just tell you that there's a fantastic full hardware range being worked out on everything to do with foot. Your feet will work. So whether it's about the door, whether it's about your lavatory functioning with lavatory, we all about the doors, and it's very simple. Sometimes it's just about pressing the partitions. So press on the left hand side and the door opens. So it's feet is going to work even if the technology doesn't have the proximity, and the proximity technology goes for a conch and you're logged inside. The feet is a fantastic thing, and we should expand ourselves to think about the feet stuff.
And there's always got to be a backup. So I think that's the easiest mechanical based backup that can be there. So yes, definitely.
Abhin, you are trying to say something. Abhin, you are mute. You are mute. You have to unmute yourself.
Next.
Yes.
So if you see that, so this is also a kind of a wall piece. Also, it can be floor piece. Just go below, Nancy. Yeah. So this is also a very interesting in terms of his understanding of shapes, depths, and also a kind of how it could be done. It is actually a kind of a very spatial, dynamic process, but it has less number of fragmental cards. So in the left hand side, what you see the small card to create a surface that can be straight line also. If you all agree on that concept, we can fine tuning more notches, or we can actually create the same plane on a very rectangular and create
Shubhankar, you might have to
shadow depth with a kind of a pattern and other things that can be possible always.
Okay, so I think there's a different bite.
Okay.
So there.
Yeah. Tell me.
And Shubhankar, mute Abhin, please.
Shubhankar, if you can please mute Abhin. I think we are listening to his pitch completely for his new project. So please, if you could mute.
Yes, Abhin. So.
Yeah. Super. As a matter of fact, while you were discussing about the foot operated part, Vivek, I just noticed that in last 5 years we have changed our interfaces from screen and keyboards to a completely different voice operated systems also, right? So because of COVID, I think our other body impediments, if I may so, are going to be used for interfacing with the world. There was a time when we never thought that our voice is going to do certain things, right? Now our feet are going to do those things. We were using things with hand. Now we will be solving a Rubik's cube with our feet and opening the doors, right? So that world is coming to us. Yeah.
So I will go into a question answer session. What we can do is I hope that all the panelists are there, and so there were some interesting questions, and we are not been able to take all direct questions, but we'll take a couple of 3-4 questions. One thing, and it's very interesting, and this is something so very interesting. And one of the gentlemen, the panel, the people who participated, mentioned how can our designs, comes to your mind, how can your planning, your designs make an economy for the world around you? Can you be the drivers of economy too? Because the most important situation all around us is survival of the people around us, economic survival. And here is something which I think this is so important to understand. Apart from infection management, this is where we can say, how can we at all contribute to that and sensitively contribute to that? They're saying, can you do something in which you offer people maintenance? And somebody said that can we have balconies where the plants can be done, and we can actually trust maintenance of the balcony, which can be a kind of employment by doing something which is not very expensive. Can we not initiate products from India and all of us resolve to take everything has to be made in India? And can we not connect to local? So we can say 60% or 70% of the materials we consume will be local. And that is a kind of nice resolve. So I'm sure that all of us agree to this, and that there's no doubt about the panel across that we will try to consume. I just want to say to the gentleman, and that is a wonderful thought that you expressed. It's a striking thought that we as planners first should know how to consume what we can make around, inspire people to actually produce. So that is something wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Before we close the session, there was an interesting thing which I of course we're not closing right now, but there's something which I want to add. Merino takes in also an initiative for an ideation contest. The people who are there and logged in or have email ID there already, we have the email ID because they've logged into this presentation or to this panel discussion. They can all participate in a competition for the ideas for tomorrow. So in terms of retrofits, essentially, if not in new planning, can you not give ideas for retrofits? And the best 4-5 ideas would be duly acknowledged and awarded by the Merino Group of Industries. And this will not only initiate thinking, but also can actually churn the R&D centers of the furniture, of the surfaces design, or the material science design all across our country. And this would also go as an input from this panel discussion to all the manufacturing centers whom we know, or the vendors whom we know, as an input, essential input. So 4 to 5 great ideas, not limiting themselves to 1 or 2, but 4 to 5 great ideas would be actually acknowledged duly and awarded by the Merino Group of Industries. So people, and the more detailed text or the description of the same, a more elaborate, more structured way of communication will actually go to your email ID, those people who have logged in. So that's something I just want to announce to you. One person, I'm taking to the questions ahead, and person said wonderfully that how do you see we bring in the natural? You say I go natural in the present apartments. Where do you see and how do we see bring more natural components in your apartments or in your homes? How do you see bringing them in? So can you not suggest, or can you not talk about how do we bring them natural stuffs or natural things? What is the, when you say natural elements, how do we do it now? I have a house, I'm living in a place, be it a bungalow, be it a place, be it already there, an apartment is there. I have my windows already there the way they are. If they allow a 20% ventilation system, I'm with that. What can I do? What can I do now when you say natural? Is it about plants? Is it about switching off the AC? What exactly can you prescribe?
I think, what I am, doing in my residence, that much I can tell you, and that's very interesting. Like, when the lockdown, that had started, so obviously there is no, help which is available to us in our household works. And I have two, three gardens in three balconies. So I am, at least, spending, say, at least 1.5 hours to 2 hours every day on gardening. And I have nurtured the garden in such a way that, that the garden has increased a lot and the new plants have been there. And I've started a kitchen garden also with a balcony which is attached to my kitchen. And there are at least 4 or 5 times I have consumed those green vegetables what I have grown in my kitchen garden. Though it is a very small, but the pleasure what you can have it from here or using that, I think that is very, very, very interesting and encouraging. So, and I know there are 2, 3 friends of mine who were never interested in their gardening, but now, since they are compelled to spend time, they have started gardening, and I know that they will continue to do so. So there are positive sides of this lockdown also. The people like us who have never been used their hobby or their the special aptitude what they are nurturing all those things. So I think it has a very, very positive side, and I am fully into gardening in my these days, and I will continue to do so. That much I can
So
tell
what
you.
he's saying is pocket gardening in an apartment. You can always find places where you can do a simple cable. I'll give you a very interesting thing. Uh, uh, in these times, there's a herb called, or the plant called, in Ayush sector, you'll see a plant called Giloy, Giloy. It's a very, very, very powerful disinfecting tool. It has a very high regenerative quality. It is often said in Ayurveda that this plant has the power to regenerate organs. If the organ systems are depleted, they can regenerate themselves. So I've been consuming this one, and I've been trying to consume. Sometimes we consume parts of it in terms of leaf or twigs which fall out, and these are all grown in my balcony. I have only a 1.5 meter wide balcony, and it grows very ideally. So if you can grow that, not only it will help you to take care of in terms of infection control, actually empower you to be much more stronger in terms of, it's an Ayurvedic medicine, no side effects. You can just boil it in a piece of water and consume it. So that's a kind of a plantation. I'm taking it further. If you like gardening, otherwise do therapy plantation, and that just keeps on growing. It's a least maintenance. It just grows. Any dried twig, just put it right there. Dried twig, just place it in any small pot. Keeps on growing. It needs sun. It needs fresh air, and that's it. And rest in a less than a month, you will be able to reap the plant and consume it. So that's the fastest growing plant, and you can spread it along, and that's very therapeutic. So that's one wonderful in terms of other things. In terms of green, the most important things which I say is furnishing. The first thing that we can do in terms of infection free is, can you not get away with your loose rugs? The furnishing material, if you can get rid of your rugs and wind up your rugs and remove them, and not and clean, make a floor which you can wipe it in a day or two every time, or clean as much cleanable surfaces, because rugs are 50% time only aesthetic purposes. Sometimes they work as a beauty and composition, interior design, a few times function also. But we can get rid of those rugs which actually address the dust, and much more easy to maintain. So one important point is this, that we can get rid of it. We will also try to have less of furnishing and fabrics which actually have fibers coming out. So if we can actually design the shading devices in places, so we can actually make something which are disposable. So sometimes you put some. I've seen houses, they hang something which can be wiped off. They made it out of beads, or sometimes they make pipes. This keeps them down, and they gather in terms of shell, in terms of screening of the shade of the sun, and then they can remove. Instead of fabric, they use this pipe material. So there are so many other things which can be cleaned, easily to clean. Metal pipes and copper, thin pipes come down, and sometimes those PVC tubes come down. I'm not in the version of PVC, but that's what I'm saying, metal tubes. So something which can be cleaned and removed rather than a lot of fabric stuff. Something sure that. Rest is more important is, please, you don't need more area. I also see a question they're given that most of the prescriptions usually come, people are saying, I need more places to work. So what happens to an LIG segment? An MIG can afford to grow, and HIG can afford to grow, but LIG cannot afford to grow in terms of space. So they want to ask this forum, and I'm also ready to participate. The question is, what happens to those LIG people? Wouldn't we want some common spaces to be created for them? And if you can suggest something, how do we handle the gym now? How do we handle spaces now? And eventually, of course. So would the planning mean, or is it only by isolation that you say, or can we not put our treadmill right in the garden, outside the common space in the condominium, and can we not use it? Or can you not put in the parking spaces? So things like this, people are wanting some suggestions from us in terms of planning. So here I just want to. Okay. Yes, please. Yes, there was a double.
Yeah. I think the roof of every building is most of the time is not been utilized. So I think in a area in the urban areas, the roof has to be properly used. We can go for an open kind of gym out there, and likewise there are gardens also. So even if you have green on the roof, and if you have your gym there, I think there's a best combination. So you can jolly well use that. And then another thing is, I think the open parking areas, the places you'll find that in the building, what we'll find in most of the cases now, the people are confined in their homes, so the ground floor is not been addressed. It has not been cleaned sometimes, while the helps are not there. Maybe you need 5 people and only 1 people is there who is working. So why don't you use the ground floor for, or there may be a time zones. Maybe 3 floors you'll be using for in the morning, and the 3 floor inhabitants, they will be using the afternoon, or something like that. Likewise, when we are using the roof, we have division of time, time zone, so that not all the people are using the roof at the same time. So likewise, we have to have some innovation, in using the spaces.
Yeah, so from here I would add something. You need not do, sometimes some places need not be done purposefully because the space does not allow. Only the usage pattern, simple usage pattern or time scheduling your usage can actually solve it. So before we jump into more space and start using it, you can just do a timetable working. Planning your time usage, planning the distribution and number of people, which places, this simply things can work. And I take a wonderful thing, roofs should be activated. The roofs if this can be activated, and open spaces, outdoor gyms will become more popular. Roofs should be activated. I buy this point, and it's not a very expensive proposal. Our roofs are almost like, if not 50% of the roof is free, apart from the tanks and other things. So we can still activate the roofs, and they're wonderful places which can be used. Scheduling is second take. So that's a wonderful take from here. And if there's another question that's there, I think it can be taken as one of the ending questions. And the question is basically, how do you think, people are saying ambience. You say ambience is very important. I have an ambience. And how do I enhance my ambience? You are designers. And whether it's my office ambience or ambience, is it the only green, or is something more that you can say in terms of ambience? How do I make my ambience much more interesting, present ambience? So if you ask me to spend more money, I don't want to spend more money because I don't have money right now. I want to sensitive. How do you actually enhance the ambience? You have some interesting ideas about enhancing the ambience. And that is one important part, one of the questions, and a couple of guys have put it up. How do you? I don't want to be living in SBS. Maybe I am too tired of my present home or the place I am in, and I cannot go out. So socializing is not there much. How do you help me understand what more thing that we can do? It may be a question pertinent to interior design, but yes, I want all of us to actually answer. And I
You
want
see, in
also to participate here. Yes,
so,
please.
can I say? Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think it is from the point of interior design. There are pros and cons. Likewise, normally we are used to go for a furniture design first, and then the fixtures or the lighting points, the fan, the AC points, those are finalized. But I think instead of going for a fixed kind of design, there will be or in your design it should be open for various options. Likewise, the furniture design should be such, and all other fittings and the lights should be such that it can accommodate a different kind of furniture layout in the same space. So that after 2-3 years, you can change the furniture layout in your space with the same furniture what you are using. You don't have to go for a different furniture. So obviously, if you go for a modular one, then you can change the composition obviously quite easily. But the design should have the positioning of the windows, the positioning of the lights, and all that, or the sufficient electrical points should be there so that you have got that scope to change your design in the future.
I'll add to this one, and what I believe is to take off your SBS factor, or to not to get fatigued by a particular thing. The important thing is, first we should get a hobby activated. If you get a hobby activated, you automatically start delving in the place and thriving in the place and an ambience. And suppose you don't have an activity, it's about human behavior. The SBS is how do you, in maybe a bookshelf, maybe a something, if you write book, whatever your hobby is connected with, you start creating spaces, adapt your spaces with that hobby. You automatically fall in love with that place. So suppose you have music stuff, so you start arranging a space or musical stuffs together in one particular place. You will start loving that place more than something else, because that's a psychological association. The other is, the important word is, that's the reason all of us had a word called handicrafts. We were all taught something, to do something from a hand. We have stopped doing that thing. We are so glued to something so virtual that we stopped doing anything. We stopped making origami. We stopped working on papers, collages, things like this. Whatever we do, start making it, and inspire your family people, inspire people around you to do this handicraft work, and try to apply them and place them alongside, somewhere on the wall, somewhere here on the table, etc. Try to participate with things which you have worked on, or others have worked on. Maybe your spouse has worked on, or your kids have worked on. So if you start decorating your place with the material which you have associated with, builds up a bigger story and takes off the SBS syndrome in a place, rather than buying stuffs which are alien to you and you just place it for some time. So if you start imbibing something which you own, I can see in Mr. House background, Debotazar, he has kept some, if I think you have one bonsai and some plant just behind you. So this is something which you must be personally attending, little water. So even if you keep a small plant and water it every day, builds up spatial association, and you start giving off the negative vibes about the SBS. And apart from that, ensure that you sit next to a window, even if you have one window and some light and some view, do something that you tend to sit more towards it. So you may pull up a chair, orient a television to something in which you start connecting more with such open spaces and together. So this is something which is going to actually tell your SBS syndrome. And so that's what it is. And anything coming from Mr. Ray? Mr. Ray, you want to say something?
I think your house has to reflect your thinking, your culture, and your context. The houses have to be contextual. Also, your geography. Suppose I live in old town of Odisha and I'm near Lingaraj temple. It is not necessary that my house has to have a lot of glass and steel. Second is, we must have a lot of light, because most of the houses, because of the darkness, you don't feel it very lightly. Private spaces must be well lit, well plants, And I think the house has to be a storytelling environment. If you have sequence of wall, like you talked about decoratives and handicrafts, and together house tells you a wonderful through thematic expressions. It has a continued story of your journey, your experience, your life, and your experience in your family and society. So it is become a wonderful journey of discovery and rediscovery someone, and you get engaged to that novel idea of connecting to the person.
Thank you very much. And I think we have done. Okay, Pradeep ji, yes, please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself. Yes, Pradeep ji.
See, I just wanted to add when we were talking about that natural, what we can do natural. You see, most of the natural dyes are also natural disinfectant. Like if you are using turmeric, turmeric is a great disinfectant.
Yes, Yes, Pradeep ji. I think he got disconnected. Maybe because of poor network, poor bandwidth. Okay. I wish he comes soon. Well, he was mentioning about the natural dyes, though. I think that's a wonderful thing. I know how much we associate, and in our country, we used to wear clothing of natural dyes itself. So that every time we move around, keep it next to the body, we were actually disinfected, or we were actually fighting infection, alien stuff. So this was wonderful in terms of your wearing clothing. And they always had tie dye. So if old stuff, they used to tie turmeric in threads, which I'm wearing. The moli. This is the moli which you wear. So they should tie with moli lot of of turmeric and keep it like a curtain in a wall in homes, and the wall where the sun would come and hit. So that would actually also disinfect the space. Very natural way of disinfecting. Camphor, kapoor, is a natural infection fighter. So if you can actually have a dispenser or do some kind of incense, ensure timing incensing in terms of camphor, it's wonderful. Sulfur, dhuno, these are the natural ways in which people lived in the system. So I think we can activate those stuff. Well, there are more questions to that, but I think we are all engaged for the time, and I'm sure the audience is there. I would like the final closure session from Madhu. Can you just help us connect and close the session together so that we can be very...
So first and foremost, I'd like to thank you for a wonderfully moderated session. It was amazing, and I think I'd like to thank everybody in the panel: Debotesh Babu, the Obin Babu, Mr. Pradeep Chopra, Mr. Ray, and it is wonderful. Absolutely a wonderful session. We've drawn a whole lot of insights, and I hope that we will be able to come back to you and work with you to implement quite a few of these things. So it's a very big thank you from my side to everybody for taking such time out, and of course to all the attendees. I think we've got a decent number today. To each one of them, thank you for being here and for asking those questions as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you, Deepika. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Anjan. Thank you all.
Thank you.